The planet of Varela was dying slowly. Once it had shining blue rivers, tall green forests, and skies that glowed with twin suns. Now, all that remained was dust and hunger. Wind carried the smell of burned metal and old blood. People no longer spoke on the streets. They just walked with hollow eyes looking for food that no longer existed. In the middle of the broken city, a thin woman moved slowly through the ash-filled road. Her name was Rhina. Her long gray scarf covered most of her face, and her arms were shaking as she carried a small child close to her chest. The child's face was pale, his lips dry. Every step Rhina took felt heavier than the last. "Mama, I'm hungry," whispered the boy, his small voice weak like a dying flame. "I know, my little star," she said softly, trying to smile even when her own stomach ached with pain. "We'll find something soon." But she had been saying that for 3 days. Her feet hurt. Her shoes were torn. Around her, buildings stood half-broken like skeletons. The war between the human colonies and the Virilan Empire had ended months ago. But for the poor, the war never really ended. The humans had left soldiers to guard the trade zones, but food was only given to those who could pay in credits, and Rhina had none left. In her hand, she held her last treasure, a golden ring. It was small, shining even through the dust. Her husband had given it to her before he was taken away by soldiers. "If things get bad," he had said, "this ring will save you and our son." Now, things were worse than bad. Rhina reached a small shop at the corner of a quiet street. A wooden sign, half-broken, swung above it. On it were words written in both human and Virelan: "Pawn and trade, fair deals for all." She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The bell above the door made a soft ding. Inside it was warm and smelled faintly of bread. Shelves were filled with metal scraps, old jewelry, and things left behind from better times. Behind the counter stood a human man, broad shoulders, short beard, eyes like deep brown stone. His name was Elias. He looked up from a small notebook and froze when he saw the woman and her child. For a long second, no one spoke. Only the sound of the child's soft cough broke the silence. Rhina lowered her eyes and placed the golden ring on the counter. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll sell this. I just need some bread for my son, anything you can give." Elias looked at the ring, then at the woman's face. He could see the truth in her eyes. She was starving. The boy was barely breathing properly. He slowly pushed the ring back toward her. "We don't buy gold here," he said quietly. Rhina's heart dropped. She thought he was refusing her. Maybe he hated aliens, maybe he thought she was worthless. She reached for the ring again, ready to leave. "Please, I beg you, it's real gold. Just one piece of bread." Elias shook his head gently. "You don't understand." He walked to a small cupboard, opened it, and took out a half loaf of bread and a flask of clean water. He placed them in front of her. "We don't buy gold," he said again. "We save lives." Rhina froze. She stared at the food like it was a dream. The smell of bread hit her nose and made her eyes water. She tried to speak, but only tears came. Elias smiled faintly and cut a small piece of bread. "Feed the boy first," he said. The child looked at the bread as if it were light itself. He took a bite, and his eyes filled with life again. Rhina pressed her hand over her mouth, unable to stop crying. Outside, a cold wind blew through the streets. People passing by looked through the glass and saw the human helping an alien woman. They whispered, pointing. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. Elias noticed, but he didn't care. He had seen too much death in his life. Gold could not buy peace for his own soul. When Rhina finally found her voice, she asked softly, "Why would you help us?" "I am not one of your kind." Elias looked at her for a long time. "Because," he said, "you remind me of someone I lost." The room went silent again. Rhina lowered her eyes. She didn't know what to say. After a moment, Elias turned to the window. Outside, a group of soldiers was walking down the street, checking doors. Their armor shone under the dull sky. Elias's face hardened. "You should stay hidden for now," he said quietly. "They don't like kindness." Rhina's hands began to shake again. "Are they coming here?" Elias nodded slowly. "Yes, but don't be afraid, I'll handle it." He moved to lock the door. The sound of the soldiers' boots grew louder. Rhina pulled her child close. Her heart pounded fast. The air felt heavy, the silence sharp. Elias turned off the lights and whispered, "Stay behind the counter. Don't make a sound." The child looked up, eyes wide. "Mama, who are they?" Rhina held him tightly and whispered, "People who forgot what mercy means." Outside, metal boots stopped right in front of the door. A shadow fell across the glass window. Then came a loud knock. The knock on the door came again, louder this time. Bang, bang, bang. Elias stood still behind the counter, his jaw tight, his heart calm, but ready. He had heard that kind of knock before, the kind that didn't wait for an answer. "Open up!" a rough voice shouted. "Human inspection team, we saw movement inside." Rhina held her child close behind a shelf. Her hands trembled. The boy hid his face against her chest. Every sound made him flinch. Elias turned his head slightly and whispered, "Stay quiet, no matter what happens." He walked slowly to the door, wiped his hands on his apron and opened it just enough to see the men outside. 4 soldiers stood there, armored, armed, and cold. The one in front wore a black helmet with a silver stripe, showing his rank. He looked around Elias's shop with suspicion. "What's your business here, citizen?" the captain asked. Elias gave a small, tired smile. "Just an old pawnshop owner, sir. Been here since the ceasefire." The captain's visor scanned the shop. His gaze paused on the half-eaten bread on the counter. "Strange," he said. "You get many customers these days?" "Only ghosts and dust," Elias replied softly. The captain's lips twisted. He pushed the door wider and stepped inside without permission. "We've had reports that some humans are hiding alien refugees," he said. "That's treason." Elias stayed silent, watching him. Behind the shelf, Rhina closed her eyes, praying her child would not cough. But the boy's small body shivered from fear, and a tiny sound escaped him, a soft whimper. The captain's head snapped toward the noise. What was that? Elias quickly dropped a box from the shelf, letting it crash to the ground. "A rat," he said calmly. "They love the smell of bread." The soldiers laughed. The captain frowned. "Rats don't cry." He started walking toward the shelves. Each step sounded like thunder to Rhina. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the soldiers could hear it. Elias moved fast. He stepped in front of the captain, blocking his path. "Careful," he said. "That shelf's unstable. You'll break your foot before you find your rat." The captain stopped, annoyed. "You talk too much for a shopkeeper." Elias's voice stayed calm. "I talk too much because silence is what starts wars." There was a tense pause. The captain studied him for a moment, then waved his hand. "Search the back." 2 soldiers walked toward the storeroom. Elias's hand twitched near the counter, where an old metal lever was hidden under the wood. He pressed it slightly, and somewhere behind the shelves a silent door opened into a narrow tunnel. Rhina felt the small movement of air behind her. She looked and saw a dim light through the opening. She understood what it meant. Escape. Elias didn't look at her, but his voice became louder to distract the soldiers. "Captain," he said, "you must be tired. How about a drink before you break something?" The captain turned back. "Trying to bribe me, old man?" Elias smiled faintly. "Trying to remind you what humanity feels like." The captain's eyes narrowed. "I fought in the war. I know exactly what humanity feels like. Pain, lies, death." Elias's expression darkened, but his voice stayed soft. "Then maybe you fought the wrong war." Before the captain could answer, a loud crash ccame from the back. One of the soldiers had stumbled into a pile of metal scraps. Nothing here, the soldier shouted. The captain growled and motioned for them to leave. Keep your door open from now on, he warned Elias. If we find out you're hiding anyone, you'll hang beside them. Elias nodded slowly. Understood, Captain. The soldiers left, slamming the door behind them. The sound echoed through the room like thunder after a storm. Elias waited a few seconds, then locked the door again. He walked to the shelf and whispered, "They're gone." Rhina came out from behind the shelf, holding her child tightly. Her eyes were full of tears. "You risked your life, for us." Elias shrugged slightly. "I've risked my life for worse reasons before." "Why?" she asked again, her voice breaking. "You could have let them take me." Elias sighed and sat down on the floor beside the counter. He looked tired, but his eyes were calm. "Because I remember what it feels like to lose a child." Rhina looked at him in silence. The child slowly opened his eyes and smiled, his small hand still holding a piece of bread. Elias looked at the boy and smiled too. "What's his name?" "Lior," Rhina said softly. "It means light." "Light," Elias repeated. "Then we'll keep his light alive." Outside, the sound of the patrol faded away into the distance. But Elias knew they would be back. People talked, and whispers traveled fast. He looked at Rhina and her son. "You can't stay here long. They'll come again." Rhina's voice trembled. "Then where will we go?" Elias stood up, went to the back wall and pulled open a hidden door made of old metal. Behind it, a dark staircase led underground. "You'll go where others went," he said, "to a place where no one is judged by what they are, only by what they've done." Rhina looked at the stairs, then at Elias. "You help others too?" He nodded once. "Yes, because I couldn't save my own family." Her eyes widened. "You lost them?" Elias didn't answer. He just whispered, "Let's go before they return." He took a small lamp and led the way down into the darkness. As the door closed behind them, the old shop stood silent again, the ring still lying on the counter, shining softly under the last light. The tunnel below the shop was narrow, dark, and smelled of dust and rust. The walls were built from old stone and broken pipes. As Rhina followed Elias, the dim light from his small lamp flickered across his face, showing scars that looked deep and old, not just on his skin, but in his eyes. Her child Lior was half asleep in her arms. His breathing had become soft, calm, the first peaceful sound Rhina had heard in many days. "Where does this tunnel go?" she asked quietly. Elias glanced back. "To a place I call the refuge. You'll be safe there, at least for now." The path sloped downward. Rhina could hear the faint hum of machines far below, the sound of hidden life. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. Finally, the tunnel opened into a wide underground chamber filled with small tents, old lights and people, both human and alien, sharing food, blankets and hope. When Rhina saw them, her eyes widened. You helped them all?" Elias nodded slowly. "As many as I can. We lost too much during the war. Feeding the hungry is how I fight back now." A young alien man walked over, smiling at Elias. "Another family?" Elias nodded. "They've suffered enough. Give them something warm to eat." The man handed Rhina a small bowl of soup. She stared at the steam rising from it like it was a miracle. She whispered, "Thank you." But even as she ate, she could not stop wondering, who really was this man who risked his life for strangers? Hours later, when the refugees slept, Rhina found Elias sitting near an old table, cleaning a rusty weapon. His eyes looked distant, lost somewhere far away. She sat beside him quietly. "You said you lost your family," she whispered. Elias didn't look up. "Yes, my wife Amara, and my little girl Lina. They died when the war reached our colony. I was a soldier back then. I believed we were saving humanity. But in the end, I saw humans burn cities, just like the enemy." He finally looked at her. "I walked away. I couldn't fight anymore. So I opened this shop, not to sell, but to heal." Rhina's throat tightened. "You save lives because you couldn't save them." He nodded silently. "That's about right." There was a long silence. The sound of a child laughing somewhere in the camp broke the stillness. Fragile but real. Then Elias's small communicator buzzed on the table. He frowned and picked it up. The voice on the other end was nervous. Elias. They found out about the tunnels. Patrols are coming. Dozens of them. Elias stood up fast. His face changed, calm but deadly serious. How long? 15 minutes. Maybe less. He turned to Rhina. You need to move, now. Rhina stood, fear filling her eyes. Where will we go? There's another exit. It leads to the outer ruins. I'll guide you halfway. She shook her head. You can't stay behind again. Elias smiled sadly. Someone has to slow them down. Before she could speak, alarms began to echo through the tunnels. People woke up, panic spreading fast. Children cried, voices shouted. Elias grabbed his weapon and started giving orders. Everyone moved to the eastern passage. Take only what you can carry. No one gets left behind. The people obeyed, trusting him. Reyna followed the crowd, holding Lior tightly. But she looked back again and again at Elias, the human who once was a soldier and now fought with compassion instead of bullets. He turned one last time to her and said, When you get out, head north. There's an old transport station. Hide there until I find you. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It was not fear. It was peace. Minutes later, explosions shook the tunnel walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The soldiers were already inside. Elias ran toward the sound of boots. Shadows moved through the smoke and laser lights flashed. Freeze! Shouted a voice. Elias raised his rifle. You should have stayed out of my city, he said quietly. The first shot echoed through the underground like thunder. He moved with skill, firing from cover, pushing back the soldiers step by step. But they kept coming, more and more of them. One grenade exploded near the entrance, shaking the walls. The lights flickered. Elias ducked behind a crate and tapped his communicator. Rhina, are you clear? Her voice came through, scared but steady. We're almost out. Please come with us. Not yet, he said. If I don't stop them, no one gets away. Elias. He cut the signal and reloaded his weapon. The soldiers were getting closer. Through the smoke, the captain from before appeared, his armor gleaming under the red lights. You again? The captain said coldly. I knew you were hiding something. Elias smirked. I told you, Captain. I sell hope, not gold. The captain raised his gun. Hope dies today. Maybe, Elias whispered, but not before I stand. He charged forward, firing. The tunnel filled with light and sound, chaos and courage mixed together. Far away, Rhina reached the end of the tunnel. She turned just in time to see a flash of light behind her. Then the sound of collapsing stone. No, she whispered, holding her son tighter. The tunnel behind them sealed with smoke and fire. Lior looked up at her. Mama, where's the human? Rhina's voice broke. He stayed to protect us. Will we see him again? She looked at the burning sky above the ruins and whispered, I hope so. Smoke still hung in the air as Rhina stumbled out of the tunnel, clutching Lior tightly against her chest. Her legs shook. Her throat burned from dust. Behind her, the tunnel entrance had collapsed, the sound of falling stones still echoing in her ears. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the red sky. The city above was broken and silent, its towers leaning like tired giants. The wind carried the smell of fire and ash. Lior looked up weakly. Mama, is the human coming? Rhina's lips trembled. He will, he promised. But deep inside, fear gnawed at her heart. She turned toward the direction Elias had told her. North. Her feet dragged over the cracked road. Every step hurt, yet she didn't stop. After hours of walking through the ruins, they reached the remains of what looked like an old transport station, its sign half buried in rubble. A faint symbol of a bird's wing was carved on the wall. Rhina touched it softly. This must be the place. She looked around, nothing but shadows. Then suddenly a low hum filled the air. From the ground, a metal panel slid open, revealing a hidden staircase leading downward. Rhina froze. What is this? A voice echoed from below, calm and warm. You're safe here. Come down before anyone sees. She hesitated but remembered Elias's words. There's a refuge where no one is judged. Holding Lior close, she stepped inside. The staircase led into a wide underground base glowing with soft blue lights. The air was clean, the walls built from both human and alien technology. People moved around, Humans, virelins, and even a few other species are working together, sharing food, healing wounds. Rhina gasped. So many? A tall woman approached her, human, wearing a mechanic's jacket with grease on her hands. You must be Rhina, she said. Elias told us you might come. Rhina's eyes widened. You know him? He's alive? The woman's smile faded slightly. We don't know yet. The patrol hit his sector hard. But if anyone can survive, it's him. She placed a gentle hand on Rhina's shoulder. Come. You and your boy need rest. Rhina followed her through the refuge, a maze of tunnels, sleeping quarters, and small gardens grown under lamps. Children laughed as robots carried water buckets. For the first time in a long while, Rhina heard laughter that didn't sound forced. Lior ran to a small group of children playing with floating light spheres. His giggle echoed through the hall. Rhina smiled weakly. He hasn't laughed like that in months. The woman nodded. Elias saved many children like him. This refuge exists because of his kindness, Rhina whispered. He's more than kind. He's brave, the woman smiled faintly. Bravery and kindness, that's what he calls true strength. Later that night, Rhina sat alone beside a small fire pit. The warmth reminded her of Elias's shop. The smell of bread, his quiet voice saying, "We save lives." She closed her eyes, fighting the tears that kept returning. Then she heard footsteps. Turning, she saw the same woman from before carrying a small box. Elias asked me to give you this if you ever reached here, she said. Rhina's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a folded piece of cloth, Elias's shop apron burned at the edges, and a data chip. The woman gestured toward a small hollow screen. Play it, it's for you. Rhina inserted the chip. The screen flickered and Elias's face appeared, tired, bruised but smiling. Rhina, his voice said softly, if you're seeing this, then you made it. Good. That means my plan worked. Don't cry. I'm not gone yet. But if I don't return, promise me you'll stay strong. Promise me you'll feed others like I fed you. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The war broke us, but kindness can rebuild what hatred destroyed. Keep the refuge alive. Keep saving lives. The message ended. Rhina covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. He knew, she whispered. He knew this would happen. The woman placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He always prepares for others, never for himself. Days passed. Rhina began helping the refuge, cleaning, cooking, teaching the children stories of peace. She found herself growing stronger, not because life was easy, but because hope had returned. But one night, a strange sound woke everyone, a beeping from the main monitor. A scout had returned from the surface, running into the main hall. Commander, there's movement near the south ruins. Rhina froze. Who is it? The scout showed a hologram, smoke, debris, and a single figure walking through fire, holding something heavy. It's a human, the scout said. He's carrying wounded soldiers, alien and human both. Rhina's heart stopped. Elias, she whispered. But the image was blurry. The figure limped, slow, like someone barely alive. The commander ordered, "Prepare medical units, open gate 3. Rhina ran toward the tunnel, her heart racing faster than her feet. As she reached the lower gate, a wave of hot air rushed in, and through the smoke she saw a familiar shape step forward. Elias's face was covered in soot, his clothes torn, blood on his arm, but his eyes still burned with quiet strength. Behind him were survivors, soldiers and civilians alike, the very people who had tried to hunt him. He looked at Rhina, smiled faintly and whispered, "Told you. I'd find you." She ran forward, tears in her eyes, and caught him before he fell. He laughed weakly. "We don't buy gold. We save lives, remember?" Rhina nodded, holding him tightly. "Yes, Elias. And now we'll save yours." The refuge was silent that night. The air smelled of warm soup and old metal. Children slept inside small tents, their breathing soft and even. For the first time in many weeks, Rhina felt a moment of peace. Elias was still weak from his wounds, lying on a stretcher near the fire pit. His arm was bandaged, his face pale but calm. "You should rest." Rhina said softly. You've done enough. He smiled faintly. I'll rest when no one here goes hungry again. Rhina shook her head. You can't save everyone. Elias looked at her with tired eyes. Maybe not. But if I stop trying, I stop being human. Those words stayed in her mind long after he closed his eyes. She sat beside him, listening to the quiet hum of machines that powered the underground refuge. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped like a slow heartbeat. Then, without warning, that heartbeat stopped. The lights flickered once, then twice. A low alarm began to sound, long, cold, and sharp. Rhina stood quickly. What's happening? A guard ran into the hall shouting, They found us. The patrol's here, dozens of them. Elias opened his eyes. His face hardened. How did they find this place? No idea, the guard said. But they've sealed the upper exits. We're trapped. Elias pushed himself up, ignoring the pain in his side. Get everyone to the eastern tunnel. Rhina, help the children. She nodded and ran to gather them. Mothers woke their sons, and daughters, pulling them close, whispering, It's all right, we'll be fine. But their eyes showed fear. The ground shook with the sound of explosions above. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Lior clung to Rhina's arm, trembling. Mama, is it the soldiers again? Yes, she said softly, holding him close. But the human will protect us. Elias grabbed his rifle, the same old weapon he'd carried since the war. We can't win a fight, one of the refugees said. There are too many. Then we buy time, Elias answered. Enough for them to escape. Within minutes, chaos filled the refuge. Alarms wailed. The blue lights turned red. Doors hissed open and shut as people ran through the tunnels. Elias and a few volunteers took position near the main gate. He set small mines along the entrance, his hands steady even while blood dripped from his fingers. Rhina saw him and shouted, You can't fight alone again. He turned, his voice strong but kind. This time, I'm not alone. You're all with me, by saving each other. She wanted to run to him, to stop him, but the roar of another explosion shook the ground. The wall near the gate cracked open. Smoke poured in. Positions, Elias shouted. Protect the weak. Laser fire blazed through the darkness. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Screams echoed through the tunnels. Rhina hid the children behind heavy crates. She could see Elias through the smoke, moving like a shadow, firing, covering every retreating family. He was bleeding, but he didn't stop. The captain of the patrol, the same man from the pawnshop, stepped through the hole in the wall. His armor glowed red in the dim light. So this is your refuge, the captain said coldly. A nest of traitors. Elias stood tall. A nest of survivors. You could have been one of us, the captain sneered. But you chose them, animals who don't belong on our worlds. Elias raised his weapon slowly. Then maybe I don't belong on yours. The captain fired first. The blast hit Elias in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell to one knee but fired back, striking the captain's chest plate. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the air again. Rhina screamed, Elias! He looked at her once, eyes full of calm fire. Take them and run! But go! He shouted. She grabbed Lior's hand and ran toward the eastern tunnel with the others. Behind her, the explosions grew louder. The ground trembled like a living thing. As she ran, Lior cried, Mama, he's still there. Rhina's heart tore inside her. He'll follow us. He always does. But deep down, she feared the truth. When they finally reached the end of the tunnel, the survivors burst into the open air. The night sky above was filled with smoke and falling light, the burning wreckage of ships. Rhina turned back, tears streaming down her face. In the distance, deep under the ground, a final explosion thundered. Then silence. She dropped to her knees, clutching Lior. He saved us all, she whispered. The commander of the refuge placed a hand on her shoulder. His sacrifice won us a chance to live. Rhina wiped her tears. No, she said softly. It wasn't sacrifice. It was love. She looked up at the sky, the stars dim but still shining. Elias, your light will never fade. Behind her, the surviving refugees began to rebuild under the open sky, their hearts carrying the same message that had once come from his lips. We don't buy gold. We save lives. The morning after the attack was silent. The refuge was gone, buried beneath stone and smoke. The survivors had escaped through the old tunnels, their faces gray with ash, their eyes full of loss. Rhina walked among them slowly, holding Lior's hand. Her heart felt empty, like a candle whose flame had gone out. Every sound, a cough, a sob, the rustle of wind, reminded her of what they had lost. Elias was gone. The words kept echoing in her mind. He had stayed behind again, just like before. Only this time she hadn't seen him walk out of the fire. They reached a broken hillside overlooking the ruins of the city. Smoke still rose from the earth, curling into the pale sky like whispers of the dead. Lior tugged her sleeve. Mama, he said softly, is the human in the stars now? She knelt beside him, tears welling up again. Yes, my love. He's watching us from up there. Lior looked up at the sky, so gray and distant. Then I'll wave so he can see me. Rhina smiled weakly. He will see you, little light. She hugged her son tightly, her tears falling onto his hair. Around her, people began to build small shelters using broken metal and plastic. No one spoke much. They just worked in silence, together, the way Elias had taught them. That night, when the others slept, Rhina sat alone near the edge of the camp. The stars were faint through the dust, but one shone brighter than the rest. She whispered to it, You kept your promise, Elias. You saved us all. But what do I do now? Her voice broke. I don't know how to live without your words. As she cried softly, she noticed something half buried in the dirt nearby, a small piece of metal shining faintly under the starlight. She dug it out carefully. It was a badge, the same one Elias had worn on his jacket. On the back, scratched by hand, were the words, Keep saving lives. Her breath caught. It felt like he was speaking to her again. She held the badge close to her chest. I will, she whispered. I promise. Days turned into weeks. The survivors began to rebuild a small community on the surface. Rhina worked harder than anyone, gathering food, fixing old machines, comforting children. People started to look to her for guidance. One evening, the commander approached her. You've become the heart of this camp, he said quietly. Rhina shook her head. I'm just keeping a promise. She had started something new, a place they called the Bread Circle. Every day they baked small loaves of bread from whatever ingredients they could find and shared them freely with anyone who came hungry. People from nearby ruins began to visit. Some brought nothing, some brought stories. Everyone left with food and a spark of hope. Lior often helped his mother, handing bread to strangers with a shy smile. For you, he would say, the human would want you to have it. One day, while Rhina was preparing dough, a traveler arrived, a human soldier with a torn uniform and tired eyes. He looked at the camp and then at Rhina. Are you the one running this place? She nodded slowly. We all run it together. He took off his helmet. I knew a man once. Name was Elias. Said if I ever lost my way, I should find the woman with the ring. Rhina's heart stopped. He's alive? She whispered. The soldier shook his head. I don't know. He saved my squad that night, carried us through the tunnels when everything was falling apart. He told me to deliver this if I survived. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of cloth, burned and torn. Inside was a tiny sealed chip. Rhina took it with shaking hands. Thank you. The soldier nodded once and left without another word. That night, under the quiet sky, Rhina placed the chip in an old holo reader, The screen flickered, and Elias's face appeared again, pale but smiling. "Rhina," his recorded voice said. "If you're hearing this, then I didn't make it back. But that's all right. You don't need me anymore. You've already learned everything I could teach." He looked down for a moment, then back up. "When I first met you, you offered gold for bread. But you gave me something more valuable. A reason to believe that compassion can still exist. Keep believing, Rhina. Keep saving lives. Because one act of kindness can rebuild an entire world." The image froze, then faded away. Rhina sat in silence for a long time. Then she smiled through her tears. "You were wrong, Elias," she whispered. "We still need you. But we'll make you proud." The next morning, as the sun rose over the gray sky, Rhina stood before the camp holding a loaf of bread high. "From today," she said, "no one in this camp will ever go hungry again. Not while we can share, not while we can remember." The people cheered softly, tears shining in their eyes. The bread circle became a symbol, a living promise born from sacrifice. And as Rhina looked up, she saw that same star in the sky again, glowing brighter than before. She whispered, "I kept your promise, Elias. I kept saving lives." Months passed after the fall of the refuge. The land slowly healed, and so did the hearts of those who survived. Where once there had been ruins and silence, now there were voices, children laughing, people singing, and hammers striking metal as homes were rebuilt. The camp had grown into a small town called Haven Light. At its heart stood a tall wooden post where a small piece of cloth waved gently in the wind. On it were written the words Elias had once said, "We don't buy gold. We save lives." Rhina watched the people every morning. Humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing food, tools, and stories. The bread circle had become a tradition. Every sunrise, a loaf of bread was baked for anyone who came hungry. Lior, now stronger and full of energy, helped every day. He had his father's gentle smile and Elias's courage in his eyes. "Mama," he said one morning, "do you think Elias is still watching us?" Rhina smiled softly. "Yes, my light." He never stopped watching. She looked at the sky. A new dawn was breaking, golden light spilling over the dusty hills. Hope had returned, and with it something even greater, faith and kindness. That afternoon, a loud sound filled the air, the low rumble of engines. People stopped working and looked toward the horizon. A convoy of ships was landing near the edge of town. The air shimmered as dust rose around the descending crafts. Rhina felt a wave of fear. "Is it another patrol?" she whispered. The commander of the camp raised his scope and frowned. "No, these aren't warships. They're rescue carriers, marked with both human and alien emblems." The ships touched down gently and their doors opened. Soldiers stepped out, humans and Virulans together, wearing the same gray and white symbol of peace. At the front walked a tall woman with short hair, carrying a flag of unity. "We come in peace," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We're from the new coalition. We're rebuilding what war destroyed." The crowd gasped. For years they had lived in fear of soldiers. Now those same uniforms carried hope instead of death. Rhina stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Who leads this coalition?" she asked. The woman smiled. "A man named Elias Turner, former soldier, said we'd find light here." Rhina froze. Her voice cracked. "Elias, he's alive?" The woman nodded. "He saved us. He rebuilt the coalition from the ashes. He sent us to find you." The world around Rhina blurred. Tears filled her eyes. For months she had dreamed of hearing that name again, prayed it wasn't just a memory. Where is he now?" The woman pointed toward the largest ship. "Inside. He wanted to see you himself." Rhina ran. Her feet carried her across the camp, past tents and cheering people, past Lior's joyful shout. Her breath came fast, her heart beating louder than the engines still cooling behind her. Inside the ship, the air smelled of medicine and oil. She followed the sound of soft voices until she reached the medical bay. And there, sitting on a cot with one arm in a sling, was Elias. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes still held that same quiet light, the light of a man who never stopped believing. Rhina froze in the doorway. "Elias," she whispered. He looked up slowly and a small smile spread across his face. "Took you long enough." She ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "I thought you were gone. I thought you died. I almost did," he said softly. But someone pulled me from the rubble. Guess the universe wasn't done with me yet. She laughed through her tears. You kept your promise. You came back, he nodded. And you kept yours. You built something better than a refuge, and you built a home. Lior ran in then, his small feet echoing on the floor. When he saw Elias, he stopped and smiled wide. You came back. Elias bent down slowly, pain flashing in his eyes, but he managed to open his arms. Of course I did, little light. You still owe me a drawing, remember? Lior laughed and hugged him tightly. I made hundreds. Elias chuckled, his voice rough but warm. Then I guess I've got a lot to see. Rhina stood beside them, watching the man who had once saved her and now saved so many more. You gave hope when there was none, she said. You showed us what it means to be human. Elias looked around at the people gathered outside the ship, humans and aliens cheering together. No, he said softly. You showed me. Humanity isn't just in blood. It's in action, in kindness. In every life we choose to protect. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the people of Havenlight gathered around a great fire. They sang songs of unity, songs that carried through the ruins and up into the stars. Elias stood with Rhina and Lior, watching the flames dance. Lior pointed upward. Look, the stars are bright again. Elias smiled. That's what happens when people stop fighting and start healing, Rhina whispered. The light returned because of you. He shook his head gently. The light was always here. We just had to remember it. The fire reflected in their eyes, and for the first time in years, peace truly felt real. As night fell, the wind carried the last words of Elias Turner, words that would one day become the creed of a new world. We don't buy gold. We save lives. And under the shining stars, humanity returned, not as conquerors, but as saviors.